Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Marshall Hauserman. I'm the Director of Enrollment for UIC Global at the University of Illinois at Chicago. We're here today to talk about the Master of City Design program here in the College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs. I'm joined today, and I'm glad to be joined by the Director of the Master of City Design program, Dr. Sanjeev Vidyarthi, and the Director of the Urban Planning and Policy Graduate Studies at UIC, Dr. Rachel Weber. Thank you both for joining us today. Do you both want to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit about your background? Sanjeev, we'll start with you.
All right. Thanks, Marshall, for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to all of you across the world. I direct this new Masters of City Design program here at UIC. Graduated in architecture from Bombay in early 1990s, and then I worked for several years as a self-employed architect in the city of Jaipur before changing my mind and started seriously about graduate studies. And several of you, I expect, would be in the same boat. I looked around for a kind of a program that sort of meets the professional expectations of making sense of the kind of work practitioners do, but also which was theoretically sophisticated and could help me make sense of the kind of practices architects and designers employ in the actual field. I didn't find many, but nonetheless, I started off my graduate school in Belgium and then moved on to University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, where I did another master's and a PhD before landing here at Chicago.
Great. Rachel, would you like to
Sure.
tell us a little bit about your background as well?
Thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to talk with you all. As Marshall mentioned, I'm the director of graduate studies here in the Department of Urban Planning and Policy. I'm also a professor. I teach primarily in the areas of real estate, economic development, urban politics. Even though I'm not a designer and architect, I am very interested in researching and understanding the built environment, particularly the sort of financial and political conditions that are required for new construction and for renovation and rehabilitation. And recently wrote a book about Chicago's experience in the sort of the 2000s with the sort of finance-driven construction boom and then sort of the aftermath of that. My background is in planning, but also in sort of economics and political economy, basically. Even though my work is primarily focused on Chicago these days, I have a lot of experience globally. I lived in India for a couple of years where I did research in this field, and then most recently I've returned from a year-long visiting professorship at the University of Barcelona.
Great, thank you so much. Rachel, would you like to tell us a little bit about the history of the College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs and what makes it stand out and is unique here in Chicago at UIC?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are a very unique, we're a unique college because we came out of the university's sort of urban commitment and Great Cities, we called it the Great Cities Initiative, then the Great Cities Commitment, which is basically our urban university committing itself to the study of cities, not just Chicago, but cities around the world, global cities. And so this is an initiative that all departments around campus, whether it was dentistry and medicine or engineering, signed up for and signed on to. But our college was really the jewel in the crown. It was meant to be sort of the kind of leading this initiative by focusing the entirety of the university on sort of issues facing cities, whether that was sustainability and sort of urban environmental issues or the sort of persistence of poverty and inequality. So our college was born in the 1990s, even though the different departments existed before that. And we've been running our master's program in urban planning since the 1970s. And we're one of the largest graduate programs in urban planning in the country, both in terms of the number of students we have, got about 150 master's students. And we have a college comprised of 2 academic units, urban planning and policy, as well as public administration, and then 9 different research centers and institutes, all doing research on urban issues. It brings in a lot of grant funding every year.
Great. So for today's agenda, we're going to start with a program overview of the Master of City Design program and just some of the details, degree timeline, requirements to completing the degree. The second part of our focus is really going to be on the benefits of the program. Specifically, you'll hear a lot about the location and why that's so important, the professional opportunities in its STEM designation. And then in the last section, we're going to talk about how you can apply and the average student profile for the Master of City Design, and some of the prerequisite requirements that maybe a student should have in their background if they're looking to complete a master's degree in city design here at UIC. So the biggest question and the first question that I think is on everyone's mind is, what is the Master of City Design degree program? Sanjeev, would you care to give us a little bit of an overview of what the Master of City Design program is?
As you can see on the screen, the Master of City Design degree essentially is an intensive a graduate degree. That means you need a professional degree before you come into this intensive master's that's sort of immersive in nature, where the students work closely with practitioners in actual sites within the region of Chicago, and it focuses on urban design aspects of built environments. So here our focus essentially is at the intermediate scale. Architects do a lot of projects at the level of sites, whereas planners focus at the city and regional level. But there is this distinctive intermediate scale in between where much of the action happens. And that's where the spatial relationship and interaction effects between people and places they inhabit sort of come to the fore. So students learn how to plan for this intermediate scale urban design stuff, if you call that. Working with latest cutting edge theoretical ideas, hands-on engagement with communities and people, and then design knowledge across spatial scales that range from sites to communities to sub-cities to cities and the entire regions.
Okay, and the degree timeline is pretty structured, correct? It starts in the fall. It's a fall start program only for a reason. Can you give us a little bit of an overview as to the timeline to completing the degree and why it's structured in the way that it is?
Sure. Since this is a intensive graduate program, it is cohort based. That means you enter as part of a cohort. And Rachel and I sort of, as part of the admissions committee, look specifically for creating a cohort where the people from different backgrounds and different parts of the world, and they can learn together in joyful ways. So the program always has an intake during the fall, and then spring semester, and then a half summer semester. The half summer is about 4 weeks. So in total, about 10 months, and you do a total of 38 credits.
Right. So the students start in the fall. By the middle of summer, they've completed their degree requirements. Typically, correct?
That is correct. So the classes would start somewhere in the last week of August, and they would be finishing their programs somewhere in the middle of June.
Great. And so as you can see, some of the benefits to that are there's a reduction in the cost of the program because it can be completed in that time frame, and also save students time as they're looking for that additional option, which some may want to enter the job market right away, start searching for those professional opportunities, and others may want to matriculate into a doctoral program or start thinking about how that can be used for a PhD.
That is correct. The one thing though to keep in mind here is that this is intensive and immersive. So students should plan on, focusing on the program. It would entail not having jobs on the side or expecting a assistantship of any sort, whether a teaching or a research or a graduate assistantship. It is intensive and immersive. So come on, focus on doing this, getting it done in 10 months.
Great. And then here we have just an overview of sort of a sample course schedule. And you want to talk a little bit about sort of the cohorting of the program and how the structure of how students go through with the courses that they have.
So as is clearly evident in this slide, each of the semesters, so that's the fall semester, the spring semester, and the summer semester is anchored by a studio. The fall and spring semester studio is worth 8 credits. That means it meets twice a week. In the fall semester, students also do an advanced urban spatial analysis and visualization course, and another course that sort of focuses on cutting edge theories. This preps them up for the spring studio, where the focus of the studio changes to another scale. Students also do a global urbanization and planning class, and they can select and selective from almost 30 courses that Department of Urban Planning and Policy offers. In the summer, then after having done the fall and spring, the students, and summer is beautiful in Chicago, students go out and engage with a place-based community doing a share it, where the focus is actually working with stakeholders, different planning players and community members to create a plan for a particular place.
And the perfect time to do that out in the city is in the summer in Chicago, right? This morning, for anyone on here, it's actually snowing fairly hard.
It's also kind of beautiful.
It's beautiful snow, and Chicago is beautiful snow. Rachel's absolutely right. But I think to be outside the entire time doing something like a charrette would be, a summer would be a great time to have that opportunity. The next sort of question I think people will have is, well, why, I understand now more a little bit about the city design, but why city design at UIC? And I'm going to kick that over to Rachel to talk about just a little bit about some of the reasons that you might want to do city design at UIC.
I can't think of a better city to study this issue in. I mean, Chicago is renowned, historically for being in some ways the sort of birthplace of planning in the United States, with the 1909, Daniel Burnham's plan for the city of Chicago. There's been just so many different sort of efforts to kind of govern and manage the built environment as the city was growing, starting in the late 19th century. And the city has just, it's very sort of receptive to planning. And because there's such there's both sort of government agencies and a very sort of dense network of nonprofit organizations and then consulting firms and some of the major architecture and engineering firms, all headquartered here. There are just so many opportunities to sort of engage in the world and with the practice of city design and urban planning here in Chicago. And what's great is that we have a very active group of advisors and mentors and organizations who are familiar with our university and with our program, who have been helping us out with this particular program. Providing opportunities for students to sort of, practice what they're learning in the classroom, in the professional world, coming into the classroom and talking about what's happening in real time in Chicago. So it's just, it's the 3rd largest city in the United States. But just sort of aside from that, the field of city design and urban planning is so critical and important here. It's so sort of part of the public discourse. So again, I can't imagine a better place to study this topic. Sanjay, you want to add something?
Quickly.
Sanjay,
yeah. So one additional point, as our audience across the world sort of thinks about studying for their master's degree abroad, Many American universities are located in small places. UIC is one of the handful of universities that's located in the very center of a major global city of Chicago. So that's something to consider as well, is the location of the program. There's no point studying urban planning or urban design in a small city, right? A city which is 5,000, 10,000 people, because then you do not really get to engage with an urban area in your studios and classes, where Chicago provides that approach.
And we're a 10-minute walk to the central business district, to the Loop. So you walk out of our building and you are in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, we are neighborhood adjacent to the Loop in downtown, and you can't help but notice that as soon as you walk outside and see all of the skyscrapers coming out from downtown. So that's great. Do you mind speaking a little bit about some of the professional opportunities that students would have coming out of a Master of City Design program? I think some students might not understand what employers would look for this type of degree, and maybe what sort of titles students have coming out of this type of program. So maybe just a little bit of an overview of that.
Our students find work in a variety of public sector, nonprofit, and private sector consulting and development types of firms. And they work in the capacity, they have different titles. I mean, some have the title of planner, right? And they're working for a local government in a very sort of structured bureaucracy. Others are working more as sort of project managers on a kind of case-by-case basis on different types of projects, often around the world. And that's something I would want to point out. I mean, even though, again, the city offers so many different opportunities to practice and apply, that these skills are infinitely transferable. And we recognize that students may want to go back to their home countries, or they want to practice sort of globally, working for some of the big sort of architecture and engineering firms, where 1 month they're in Shanghai and another month they're in Buenos Aires, working on different kinds of projects. So our students have found work at those big sort of global consulting firms and architecture engineering firms, working on teams with people who are trained as engineers and people who are trained as architects, and sort of the finance people, engaged in large-scale projects, infrastructure projects, that are transforming developing parts of the world. So wherever there's a lot of sort of growth and construction taking place, you'll find students who have been trained in this particular area.
Great. One thing that I wanted to add, as you're thinking about a Master of City Design through UIC, is that applying through the UIC Global Graduate Direct process gives you and provides you as a student access as well to an additional layer of career support in our Career Accelerator program. So for international students that really may need additional assistance in thinking about how to develop a resume, or for a US market, or how to think about applying for internship opportunities, or their future OPT opportunities as they progress through their degree. One of the things that we do in the Career Accelerator is really take the needs of international students and provide students with additional cultural and contextual guidance in how to develop their resume. UIC has some great career services offices built in throughout the university. But in all those cases, they either meet the needs of all university students. The main Career Services Center at UIC has to develop and meet the needs of all UIC students, or they are tailored to a specific area of academic expertise where students then are looking for professional experiences based off of that, such as the College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs. One of the things that we can provide in the Career Accelerator program is additional assistance in the international component is, and what we find is that students often have written resumes in the past, they've applied to internships, but the process is so different country to country. It's not that any way is right or better than any other, it's just that it's different. And so as a case study, one of the, as an example, one of the students that we worked with in the past, Shradali, as she says in her testimonial here, when she came to the US, she had no idea how the resume process worked. Well, that's a little bit incorrect. She had a resume that was actually perfectly acceptable for applying for roles and jobs and internships in India. But the resume process is slightly different here than it is there. And so what they really did, she did with our career advisor, was really look at how she can customize that and make that more specific to a US-centered focus, which helped her land some paid jobs on campus. And also now she is working post completing her degree here in the United States as well. Rachel, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the urban planning and policy student organizations that exist and the importance of getting involved in those?
Sure. I mean, I would say, just to follow on what you were just saying in terms of professional development, one of the main sort of foci of these organizations is, helping students sort of, better enhance their chances of landing the job of their dreams, and really helping our students sort of beef up on some of their career-oriented skills. So whether that's helping with the resume or do public speaking, our student organizations bring speakers to campus on topics related to urban planning and city design. So we have a very active set of student organizations and a very active alumni association also related to professional development. If you are interested in being matched up with a mentor, somebody who's currently working in the field, our alumni association runs a program that will help to find you somebody that you can meet for coffee with every month, or, to sort of talk to about, your concerns or your interests, and somebody who could take a look at your resume and offer some professional advice and feedback. So there are a lot of opportunities for both sort of professional and sort of career development, but also sort of socializing, which I think is really important to our students, even if they're going to be very busy. Particularly if you're coming from abroad, you may not know a lot of people. Our student organizations plan outings and, going out to dinner on Fridays and, different kinds of parties and, ways of sort of celebrating important milestones like the end of the semester. So it's a very nice and very sort of active community.
That's great, and the social aspect is extremely important as we, and I'm glad that you brought that part up as well. It's also great, and it just ties in again, as we've talked about from the beginning, and I warned you we would, our location and the student organizations being here in Chicago, really they have that student network that then helps bring in or tie into professional networks that might exist in the city, which makes it really easy to engage, because we are downtown, essentially, for someone to finish class and 30 minutes later be at a professional networking event. I think that's really important to highlight and discuss. Sanju, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I want to reinforce the point Rachel made about the mentorship program. It is important to keep in mind that this is one of the largest graduate planning programs in the US. So you can not literally walk into any office, whether it's a professional consulting firm, a planning agency, or a nonprofit involved in built environment in Chicago, and not find an alumni of UPP. Every place has several, if not more. So that's a great advantage to have, to be in a city where the department and its graduates are very well known and extensively widespread.
Great. And then can you talk a little bit, Rachel, about the research centers that exist here in the College of Urban Planning, especially as they relate to urban planning policy and city design.
Sure. I mentioned earlier that we have 2 academic units that are sort of responsible for delivering curriculum and degree programs. But then we have these different research centers and institutes that are all doing work that I think our MCD students would find really interesting. So there are opportunities to sort of interface and engage with the research that's taking place in them in a variety of ways. One is that the faculty members and staff who are associated with these different institutes and centers are regularly invited guests and guest lecturers and speakers in your classes. They're also presenting their work as part of the student organizations when they're often asked to sort of speak on a Friday afternoon, let's say about some exciting project that they're involved in. And then some of the faculty and staff from these different institutes and research centers are also sort of teaching the classes, including, I believe, the charrettes in the summer. So it's a good way of sort of staying on top of cutting edge research that's taking place on not just Chicago, but cities around the globe.
Perfect. And then one of the things that's another benefit of the program is that it is a STEM designated program. And for those, just as a reminder that may not know, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And why is the STEM designation important? Every international student on an F1 student visa is allowed to work in the United States up to 1 year post completion of their degree at any level, bachelor's, master's, PhD, on an F1 as part of what's called OPT, or optional practical training. For those that have a STEM designated degree, there is a STEM extension of 24 additional months. So 36 months of OPT is offered to students upon graduation. So a student with a STEM designated degree can work up to 3 years on their F1 visa in the United States. And so if students complete either the Master of Urban Planning and Policy or the Master of City Design, which is the focus of this webinar, they do have a STEM designated degree, which allows them that optional practical training for up to 3 years. And one of the students that started with UIC Global in the fall 2019 in the Master of City Design program was Sartek, who is from India. And as you can see here from his testimonial, the Master of City Design is part of a highly ranked college, which initially caught my interest. So his initial interest was in the ranking of the urban planning and policy and the overall ranking of the College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs. It's also a STEM designated program, so he'll be able to work in the United States for a longer period after I complete my program, he says. MCD also opens doors for students with a background in architecture and planning because of the diverse course topics available. And that was one of the things we started talking about from the beginning. And maybe Sanjeev, you want to just briefly highlight that again on students with an architecture background and their ability to really succeed in this program.
So since this program is housed in a college that specializes in urban planning and public policy, students from design backgrounds, so that's architecture, landscape architecture, graphic design, even other forms of design, would find it very beneficial to learn about theory and analysis in urban settings. And when urban designers and city designers are working in multidisciplinary teams, it helps a lot to be able to learn the language and to learn the skills and tools practitioners use across disciplines. And that's what Sarthak's comment here sort of gets to, because of the diverse course topics available. He has been able to follow through his interest and gain skills and ideas in the fields that he was not equipped with originally.
Great. So now we're going to shift focus a little bit to some of the admissions requirements and what what everyone here, what Rachel and Sanjeev are looking for in a student, and what it would take for you to apply to the Master of City Design program. Here we have sort of the average student profile, and Sanjeev, you've sort of already spoken about some of the areas of undergraduate study, but maybe you and Rachel want to speak about what you're really looking for in a student with their background.
I think we're looking for, you know, people who have already some design background, right? So this isn't the program for you if you're coming to it cold.
Yeah.
So, you know, that involves, like I said, sort of an undergraduate areas of study that have some, you know, relevance to, you know, architecture and sort of and urban design. But we require a portfolio where students are able to sort of display that kind of knowledge, that they know how to draw, they know how to use some of the software. And beyond that, I mean, I think we're looking for a capacity to learn and grow in this field, and sort of somebody's going to be a good fit for this program. They're looking to see that this is a sort of bridge to their to their professional aspirations that involve some a kind of sort of design-centered kind of urbanism.
Great.
Design training, right? I would reiterate what Rachel just said. You know, you want to come here on top of your design game. You want to know the software. You want to illustrate all of that through your portfolio, and a passion for cities. Cities increasingly are the places where humans live across the planet now, increasingly a growing number of us. So more than half the people across the world now live in cities. So you want to come with a passion for cities and illustrate it in your statement that you are passionate about cities.
Yeah, that's great. Now it says here that the average profile of a student has about 1 to 3 years of work experience. Is work experience something that's required, or is it something that can be beneficial to an applicant in other ways?
That's a good question, Marshall. The way Rachel and I sort of read the applications, these are pointers in the direction. Yeah. None of this is so if your GPA is 2.9 and you are from University of Mumbai, or if it is 3.1 and you're from Shanghai, that would not really be an obstacle in our minds. What we are looking for is people who are comprehensively trained, and the GPA, we understand, varies across different universities. The years of professional experience can vary, but nonetheless, the idea here is that your package in totality sort of is robust, and we can see that you are well trained and passionate about learning further skills in the field.
Very good. One of the requirements, as you just mentioned, Rachel, is the digital portfolio, which for the purpose of the Master of City Design can be submitted as a digital PDF. But can you walk us through, Sanjeev, maybe the portfolio requirement and what it really should speak to in the portfolio as part of the application?
Sure. So this is a mandatory requirement. That means everyone who is applying to the MCD program puts together a portfolio and submits it as a PDF file along with their application. The purpose here is not to put together all the design projects you've done in different semesters. This is something that stands out. Many students would say, my first semester design in undergraduate, second, third, fourth, fifth semester, right? And you collect all of that portfolio together and submit. Do not do so. Tell us how your design thinking has developed over time. Use a variety of mediums and variety of software. So for example, include a handmade sketch, computer-generated image, a photograph you took, a design proposal you created, but showing different modes of drawing and demonstrating design thinking over time, while telling an interesting personal story, right? You need to have a story or a framework that binds all of this together. That's very helpful for the admission committee to make sense of who you are, where you're coming from, and where you plan to go with this degree.
Great. As part of the entry requirements, students should have around a minimum GPA of 3.0. but as you pointed out, there may be a little flexibility depending on the student's background or university. And we can speak about that in a second. We do have a minimum English requirement. The Graduate College of UIC requires every student to have the equivalent minimum score on an IELTS of a 6.5 overall with no part score below 6. We also accept the ITEP, which is the International Test of English Proficiency, where we look for a 4.5 with no part score in any of the sections below 4.0. And we do accept the TOEFL and the Pearson PTE as well as English proficiency or English placement examinations. Sanjeev, do you want to talk a little bit, you mentioned it before, that 3.0 is really what we're looking for, but maybe there are some instances where students might have something else in their profile that makes them the right fit.
I mean, based on our experience admitting students from across the world, we realize that some parts of the world are a little more stringent in awarding grades and marks, while others seem to be more liberal. So 3.0, I would take that as a benchmark, but if you are a strong candidate, otherwise, I would encourage you to apply, even if your GPA is little below that, and clarify that in your statement. And we duly read that, and we pay attention to different kinds of grading systems. Universities have in different parts of the world.
So it's not an automatic dismissal if a student has the equivalent of a 2.8.
That is correct.
It's not an automatic. There may be the portfolio might speak in other ways, or their grade trajectory might speak in other ways, or the university, the study the student completed, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And then some important dates, just for everyone to as a reminder, our application deadline, and that's the academic application deadline, to be reviewed and sent to the department for review is April 1st, 2020. So we have still just a little over a month for you to submit an application, complete all the requirements, all the checklist items, get that to the department and get a review from Rachel and Sanjeev. If you do decide on UIC to confirm your space, we will ask that you do that by the end of July. And the move-in date for the program, once you get an I-20 and a visa, should you choose UIC, is August 12th. The UIC Global Orientation Program starts on August 13th, which is a Tuesday, and is a week before what the department and the graduate college all have set up as orientation and onboarding, just so that we get through what is the specific context for UIC Global and international students and give you time to get adjusted to Chicago. Because for many of you, it might be the first time you're here in the United States, or even if you've been in the United States the first time in the city of Chicago. This might be a good point to also just highlight what sort of orientation activities you might have as a department as well. So Sanjeev and Rachel, if you have anything you want to add about what sort of stuff you do during prior to the start of courses.
So there are several orientations that happen, and I'm glad Marshall pointed this out. There's one that the international students would have through the UIC Global. Then there would be one by the graduate college. There's one which College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs organizes, and then there is a city design urban planning orientation. So it's important to be here early on. And the MCD specific orientation sort of involves a tour of the facility and then orienting students towards city design. Now this is important because many students have preconceived notions as to what the field means, but as pointed out, both the city of Chicago and the UIC offer a lot of resources that are specific to this field of study.
Great.
Okay, so thank you to all of our panelists. We are going to open it up for questions. As a reminder, please do ask your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat. So we will be checking the Q&A. And And we will give you all a minute to let all of that wonderful information sink in and ask any questions that you may have.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that I would really like to thank Sanjeev and Rachel very much for joining us this morning. It's very informative. The City Design program at UIC is a great opportunity, and in my belief, is something that sets us apart at UIC, and just shows some of the unique programs that we offer, and the way that we've pivoted, not just within CUPPA, but in other colleges as well. But this is one of those areas where we really have a master's degree that's unique and sort of sets us apart. A lot of that is thanks to being in the heart of Chicago. So thank you again. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules and your busy days to be with us.
Great, so we will wait a few minutes here for any questions to roll in.
We did such a great job answering, giving so much information. I think that maybe we don't have as many questions.
That's right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Carmen, thank you so much. So Carmen said, how long will it take to have an answer after the application is submitted? So once an application is submitted to the department, the average turnaround is 20 business days. But I think your department's been making the decisions much sooner than that.
2 weeks.
Yeah. So it's usually been more like 10 days rather than 20 for Masters of City Design. But given that there's an ebb and flow sometimes in work, we want to make sure that we're attuned to the 20 days is often the average. But again, we have seen decisions for city design going much faster than other programs. Of course, you're welcome, Carmen. Julia wants to know if you can highlight some of the subjects or components that might have led to STEM designation for the program. What about it is more science, technology, maybe more technology focused probably in this?
Sustainability focus. So all the programs offered by Department of Urban Planning and Policies, that includes our undergraduate program in urban studies, the 2 graduate programs in urban planning and policy and city design, and our PhD, our doctoral program, are all classified under sustainability studies for the STEM classification. And sustainability, as our audience would know, is increasingly the imperative in the field. And when we say sustainability, we measure it 2 important ways. One is the environmental, ecological aspects of sustainability, and the second is the social, racial aspect of sustainability, which in our view is equally important.
Thank you.
I did not know that. That's very interesting that it was based on the sustainability focus of that program. And that isn't the only thing that city design focuses on, but it is some important part of
The STEM.
of the STEM, and also of the what we've talked about, the built component is that of the program.
Yeah, built, and so people and places, right?
Yeah.
Sustainability work both ways, social in terms of people and ecological in terms of places.
Right. The estimated cost of the program, do you know generally what the estimated tuition cost is for the full 10 months? I'm not sure off the top of my head either.
Let me see if I can
That is
look it up.
something, that is definitely something we can get back to you with.
Oh, okay. It's different for you guys.
For the first semester, Samantha, do you?
Yeah, I'm just looking that up. I have for all master's programs a range in
Yeah.
CUPA.
Okay.
Julia, we can get back to you with the specific costs.
But the estimated costs for each semester are on the UIC website.
Yes. So I can actually put in the chat the link here. It is on our website at global.uic.edu/graduate/costs. So all of our estimated costs can be found on that webpage.
Yeah, it would be two semesters of range 1 or full semester tuition, plus a shortened
Summer.
the summer, which is going to be a much much smaller cost in tuition, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for any of our panelists here today? Okay, well, I wanted to thank all of our panelists again for joining us. This was a wonderful webinar. We did record the webinar, so we will be sending it out to all the participants. And we want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. If you think of them later, we're happy to send them along to Rachel and Sanjeev. So you can still be in contact with us after the webinar is finished. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we?